The smell of garlic and basil hit me the moment I pushed through the kitchen doors of Carmelo's, my sneakers squeaking against the black and white checkered floor. My lower back ached with that deep, persistent throb that had become my constant companion over the past 7 months, and my feet felt like they were made of concrete after only 3 hours into my double shift. "Table 12 needs water refills," Marco called out from the expediting station, not even looking up from the tickets he was reviewing. And table 7 just sat. "They're asking for you specifically." I paused mid-step, my hand instinctively going to the small of my back. Nobody asked for me specifically. I was good at my job, efficient, polite, forgettable in the way that kept tips decent and complaints minimal. That was the whole point. Stay invisible, collect my paycheck, save every dollar I could for when this baby came. "You sure they asked for me?" I wiped my hands on my black apron, smoothing it over the curve of my belly that no amount of loose clothing could hide anymore. Marco finally looked up, his weathered face creasing with something between sympathy and concern. "Yeah, Keisha, the one in the gray suit, said he wanted the pregnant black girl." His words, not mine. Heat flushed through my cheeks, that familiar combination of embarrassment and anger that I'd learned to swallow down. I was the only black server at Carmelo's, the only pregnant one too. It wasn't hard to single me out. "Got it," I said, forcing my voice to stay level. I grabbed my notepad and pen, straightening my shoulders despite the fatigue pulling at every muscle. "Table 7. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you." The dining room at Carmelo's was exactly what you'd expect from an upscale Italian restaurant in Chicago's River North neighborhood. Exposed brick walls, warm Edison bulb lighting, tables draped in white linen, and prices that made my monthly rent look like pocket change. I'd been working here for 8 months, ever since I'd arrived in Chicago with $300, a duffel bag, and a pregnancy test that had turned positive 2 weeks after I'd finally escaped Marcus. Table 7 sat in the corner, partially secluded by a decorative partition, one of the premium spots usually reserved for business dinners or couples celebrating anniversaries. As I approached, I counted 4 men, all in expensive suits that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. 3 of them were older, maybe in their 50s or 60s, with that particular polish that came from generational wealth. But it was the 4th man who caught my attention, made something in my chest tighten with instinctive wariness. He couldn't have been more than 35, with dark hair swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and harder edges. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and even sitting down, he commanded the space around him in a way that made the air feel thinner. His eyes, nearly black in the dim lighting, swept over me with an assessment that felt more like a physical touch. "Good evening, gentlemen," I said, pulling out my server smile, warm but not too warm, professional but not cold. "My name is Keisha, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The 3 older men ordered quickly scotch, bourbon, a glass of red wine. But the younger one, the one whose presence seemed to pull all the oxygen from my lungs, said nothing at first. He just watched me with those dark eyes, his expression unreadable. "And for you, sir," I prompted, pen poised over my notepad. "Macallan 18, neat." His voice was low, controlled, with the faintest trace of an Italian accent softening certain consonants. "You're new here." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. 8 months, sir." "She's been here long enough to know better than to look like that while working," one of the other men interjected, his tone sharp. He was younger than the other 2 older men, maybe mid-40s, with slicked back hair and a sneer that seemed permanently etched onto his face. "This is supposed to be a high-class establishment, not a charity." The words hit me like a slap. I felt my face go hot, my hand tightening around my notepad until my knuckles went pale. The baby shifted inside me, a gentle roll that felt like a reminder, keep it together, we need this job, we need the money. "I apologize if my appearance is unprofessional," I said carefully, each word measured. Is there anything else I can get started for you? Yeah, you can get started on maternity leave, the man continued, his voice dripping with disdain. Or better yet, maybe figure out how to keep your legs closed before you end up serving tables pregnant. Twice. The silence that fell over the table was absolute. I stood frozen, humiliation burning through every nerve in my body. My throat constricted, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. Don't cry. Don't you dare cry in front of them. Luca. The single word came from the dark-haired man, spoken so quietly it was almost a whisper, but something in his tone made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. The man who'd spoken Luca turned to him with a dismissive wave. What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, Enzo. This is Carmelo's, not some diner on the south side. Luca. The repetition was even softer this time, but laced with something dark and dangerous. Apologize. Now. I watched as Luca's face went from smug to uncertain to something approaching fear in the space of 3 seconds. Come on, I don't remember asking you to explain yourself. Enzo, that was his name, apparently set down the menu he'd been holding with deliberate precision. I said apologize. The 2 older men at the table had gone, completely still, their eyes darting between Enzo and Luca like spectators at a tennis match. The air felt electric, charged with a tension I didn't fully understand but could feel in my bones. Luca's jaw worked, his face flushing red. For a moment, I thought he might refuse. Then he turned to me, his eyes not quite meeting mine. I apologize. That was inappropriate. It was the least sincere apology I'd ever heard, delivered through gritted teeth like each word physically pained him. But before I could respond, Enzo spoke again. Leave. Luca's head snapped toward him. What? I said leave. You're no longer welcome at this table. Enzo's expression remained perfectly calm, but something in his stillness was more frightening than any display of anger could have been. And you can forget about the Riverside contract. Consider it reassigned. Enzo, come on, we're family. You can't. I can, and I just did. Enzo finally looked at his brother because they had to be brothers. I could see the family resemblance now in the shape of their jaws, the set of their eyes. This is my restaurant, my business, my decision. And I've decided that I won't conduct business with someone who speaks to my employees that way. His restaurant. The realization hit me like cold water. Carmelo's didn't have an owner who came in regularly, or at least, I'd never seen one. We dealt with Marco, the general manager, and occasionally with a man named Vincent who handled the books. But this man, Enzo, was claiming ownership with the kind of casual authority that made it impossible to doubt. Luca stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He shot me a look of pure venom before turning back to his brother. This isn't over. Yes, Enzo said quietly. It is. I watched Luca storm across the dining room, heads turning to follow his exit. The 2 older men at the table cleared their throats uncomfortably, one of them murmuring something about checking on a call before excusing himself. The other followed quickly, leaving me standing there with Enzo in a silence that felt heavier than the entire previous confrontation. I'm sorry about my brother, Enzo said, his attention finally turning fully to me. And I'm sorry you had to experience that while trying to do your job. I didn't trust myself to speak. My hands were shaking, my whole body trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline and humiliation. I managed a short nod. What's your name? He asked. Keisha, I managed, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. Keisha Williams. Keisha. He said it slowly, carefully, like he was committing it to memory. How far along are you? The question caught me off guard. It was asked without judgment, with what sounded like genuine interest. 7 months. He nodded, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a wallet. From it, he extracted several bills. I couldn't see the denominations, but there were a lot of them, and set them on the table. This is for the distress my brother caused. It's not enough, but it's a start. I can't, I started, but he held up a hand. You can, and you will. Consider it an apology from the Rossi family. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that made the space around him feel smaller. And, Keisha? Yes, sir. You don't need to apologize for your appearance. You look exactly as you should, like someone carrying life. There's nothing unprofessional about that. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw something in them that made my breath catch. Anger, yes, but directed outward, not at me. And underneath that, something else. Something almost protective. If anyone else makes you feel otherwise, you tell Marco. And Marco will tell me. He turned to leave, then paused. Actually, I'll be handling your section for the rest of the night, personally. Sir, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. His mouth curved, in something that wasn't quite a smile. I want to. And then he was gone, leaving me standing by table 7 with a stack of $100 bills and more questions than answers. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. Word had spread through the restaurant about what happened. Marco had apparently witnessed the whole thing from the kitchen, and by the time I returned to grab the drinks I'd never delivered, the entire staff was buzzing with whispers. I can't believe Luca Rossi called you that. Maria, one of the other servers, whispered to me by the drink station, and I really can't believe Enzo kicked him out. Those two have been at each other's throats for years. But family is family, you know? I didn't know. I didn't know anything about the Rossi family except what I was piecing together from context clues and kitchen gossip. Enzo owned Carmelo's. Luca was his brother. They clearly didn't get along. And apparently, the rest of the family was important enough that their disputes were noteworthy. What's the Riverside contract? I asked, keeping my voice low as I loaded glasses onto my tray. Maria's eyes went wide. You really are new to Chicago, aren't you? She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. The Rossis own half of River North. Restaurants, clubs, construction companies. The Riverside development is this huge waterfront project. Luxury condos, retail space, the works. Worth millions. Maybe tens of millions. My stomach turned over. Enzo had stripped that contract from his own brother. Because of me. Because of what Luca had said to me. The weight of those $100 bills in my apron pocket suddenly felt like lead. I made it through the rest of my shift on autopilot, my mind spinning with implications I didn't fully understand. When I finally clocked out at 11:30, my feet were screaming and my back felt like it was on fire. I changed out of my work shoes into the worn sneakers I'd walked in with, grabbed my coat from my locker, and headed for the employee exit. The alley behind Carmelo's was dimly lit, the kind of shadowy space that would have terrified me 8 months ago. Now it was just another Chicago back alley, familiar in its griminess. I pulled my coat tighter against the October chill and started the 3-block walk to the L station. I'd made it maybe half a block when I heard footsteps behind me. My heart rate spiked instantly. I'd been followed before. I knew the sound of deliberate footsteps, the particular rhythm of someone tracking prey. My hand went to my purse, fingers closing around the pepper spray I'd carried religiously since leaving Detroit. Keisha. I spun around, pepper spray raised, and found myself face to face with Enzo Rossi. He stopped immediately, hands raising in a gesture of surrender. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you. My heart hammered against my ribs. What are you doing here? Making sure you get home safely. He lowered his hand slowly, his expression carefully neutral. It's late. This isn't the safest neighborhood. I take the L every night. I'm fine. I'm sure you are. His eyes dropped to the pepper spray still clutched in my hand. But humor me. Let me drive you home. Every instinct I had screamed danger. Rich man. Dark alley. Offering rides. I'd learned those lessons the hard way with Marcus. Learned that men who seemed protective at first could turn possessive and violent in the space of a heartbeat. No, thank you, I said firmly, taking a step back. I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine on my own. Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe, or understanding. He reached into his jacket slowly, telegraphing the movement, and pulled out a business card. Then at least take this. My personal number. If you need anything at all, you call me. I hesitated, then took the card, being careful not to let our fingers touch. The card was heavy stock, embossed with gold lettering. Enzo Rossi, CEO Rossi Enterprises, and a phone number. Why? The question came out before I could stop it. Why do you care? He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching my face. Because my brother was wrong. Because you deserve better than what he said to you. And because, he stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. Because I'd like the opportunity to prove that not all Rosses are like Luca. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. I'd expected arrogance, the kind of entitled assumption that his money could fix anything. Instead, there was something almost vulnerable in his expression, a genuine desire to make amends for his brother's cruelty. Okay, I said finally, tucking the card into my purse. Thank you. He nodded, then stepped back, giving me space. Get home safe, Keisha. I turned and walked toward the L station, acutely aware of his eyes on my back, until I turned the corner and disappeared from view. My apartment was a studio in Pilsen, 45 minutes from River North, via a combination of Red Line and bus. It was small, barely 300 square feet, with a Murphy bed that didn't quite fold up properly anymore, a kitchenette where only 2 burners on the stove worked, and a bathroom where the hot water was more suggestion than reality. But it was mine, my name on the lease, my lock on the door, my space where no one could tell me what to wear, who to see, or how to live my life. I dropped my purse on the small table that served as both dining surface and desk, pulled out the stack of bills Enzo had given me, and counted them carefully. $700. I counted again. Sure, I'd made a mistake. But no 7 $100 bills, just for the distress his brother had caused. My hands started shaking. $700 was almost 2 weeks' pay. $700 was diapers and formula and the crib I'd been eyeing at the second-hand store. $700 was the difference between barely scraping by and having an actual cushion for when the baby came. I sank onto my bed, the money clutched in my hands, and for the first time all day, I let myself cry. I didn't expect to see Enzo Rossi again. Rich men didn't follow up on their grand gestures. They threw money at problems, felt good about themselves, and moved on with their lives. I knew that. I'd learned that. So when Marco pulled me aside before my shift 3 days later, I assumed I was being fired, that Luca had complained, or that having a visibly pregnant server was bad for business, or any of the dozen other reasons I'd been let go from jobs in the past. Mr. Rossi wants to see you in his office, Marco said, his expression unreadable. Enzo. Marco jerked his thumb toward the back of the restaurant, past the kitchen. He's waiting. The walk to Enzo's office felt like a march to the gallows. I smoothed my hands over my black slacks and white button-down, the closest thing I had to professional attire, and knocked on the heavy wooden door. Come in. His office was nothing like I'd expected. I'd imagined something corporate and cold, all glass and chrome. Instead, it was warm dark wood paneling, leather furniture, bookshelves lined with actual books rather than decorative spines. A desk dominated one side of the room, its surface surprisingly clear, except for a laptop and a single framed photograph I couldn't see from this angle. Enzo stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over the street below. He turned when I entered, and I was struck again by his presence, the way he seemed to command space without trying. Keisha, thank you for coming. He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Please, sit. I sat, my back straight, hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. Marco said you wanted to see me? I did. He moved to sit behind his desk, his movements controlled and deliberate. I wanted to check in, make sure you were all right after what happened. I'm fine, I said automatically, the response so practiced it came out without thought. His eyes narrowed slightly. Are you? The question, asked with such directness, made my carefully constructed composure crack. I'm as fine as I can be, considering your brother publicly humiliated me in front of customers and colleagues. He nodded slowly. That's fair. And honest. I appreciate that. He leaned back in his chair. I want you to know that Luca has been permanently banned from this restaurant. He won't be coming back. You didn't have to do that. Yes, he said quietly. I did. What he said was unacceptable. The way he spoke to you was unacceptable, and the fact that he thought it was appropriate to say those things in my establishment, to my employee, is something I won't tolerate. The weight he placed on my employee made something in my chest tighten. There was possession in those words, but not the threatening kind I'd learned to. Fear. This felt different. Protective. Maybe. Or perhaps I was reading into it, seeing what I wanted to see because I was tired and scared and so desperate for someone to give a damn about me. I also wanted to discuss your working conditions, Enzo continued, pulling a folder from his desk drawer. I've reviewed your employment file. You're working doubles 4 days a week, plus single shifts on weekends. That's what I asked for, I interrupted. I need the hours. You're 7 months pregnant. I'm aware. I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. I'm also a single mother with rent due and a baby coming in 2 months. I need every shift I can get. He studied me for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. The father? Not in the picture. I lifted my chin, daring him to judge me the way Luca had. And before you ask, yes, I'm keeping the baby. No, I'm not on any kind of assistance. And no, I don't have family helping me. It's just me. I wasn't going to ask any of those things. His voice was gentle, lacking any trace of judgment. I was going to say that I'd like to offer you a different position. I blinked. What? The office needs an administrative assistant. Answering phones, managing schedules, filing, that kind of thing. It's Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and it pays more than serving. You'd have health insurance, paid time off, and you could sit down while you work. He pushed the folder across the desk toward me. I had HR draw up an offer letter. I stared at the folder like it might bite me. Why would you do this? Because you're a good worker. Because you shouldn't be on your feet for 12 hours a day while you're pregnant. And because I can. He leaned forward slightly. Look, Keisha, I know you don't know me. I know you have no reason to trust me. But I'm not doing this out of pity. I'm doing this because it makes business sense to keep good employees. And because... He stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. Because... I prompted. His eyes met mine, and in them, I saw something I couldn't quite name. Because when I look at you, I see someone who's fighting, someone who's doing everything in her power to build a life for herself and her child. And I respect that. I want to help if I can. The sincerity in his voice made my throat tight. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe that someone actually gave a damn, that this wasn't some elaborate setup or scheme. But I'd learned the hard way that when things seem too good to be true, they usually were. I need to think about it, I said finally. He nodded, not looking surprised or offended. Take all the time you need. The offer stands regardless. I stood, the folder clutched in my hands. Thank you. For this, and for everything else. Keisha? He stopped me before I reached the door. One more thing. The money I gave you the other night, it wasn't a loan. You don't owe me anything. Not gratitude, not acceptance of this job, nothing. Understood? I nodded, not trusting my voice, and fled before the tears threatening to spill could fall. I didn't give Enzo an answer for 3 days. The offer letter sat on my tiny kitchen table, untouched, while I worked my regular shifts and tried to convince myself that accepting help from a man I barely knew wasn't the same as making myself dependent on him. But the truth was harder to ignore every time my feet swelled to the point where I could barely fit them into my work shoes. Every time my back screamed in protest after carrying heavy trays. Every time I caught my reflection in the restaurant's bathroom mirror and saw the exhaustion etched into every line of my face. I was 26 years old, 7.5 months pregnant, and running on fumes. Pride was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. On the fourth day, I knocked on Enzo's office door before my shift started. "Come in." He looked up from his laptop when I entered, and something in his expression shifted wariness, giving way to something that looked almost like hope. "I'll take the job," I said before I could change my mind. "If the offer's still open." "It is." He stood, moving around his desk with that controlled grace that seemed to characterize everything he did. "When can you start?" "I need to give Marco 2 weeks' notice. Already handled. He knows you'll be transitioning to the office. You can start Monday if that works for you." Of course he'd already talked to Marco. Of course he'd planned ahead, anticipated my acceptance before I'd even made the decision myself. I should have been irritated by his presumption. Instead, I felt a strange flutter of something else. Relief, maybe, or gratitude that someone was thinking ahead for me, planning for my well-being when I'd been so focused on simple survival. "Monday works," I said quietly. His smile was small but genuine, transforming his usually serious face into something almost boyish. "Good. I'll have Adriana from HR walk you through the bay, paperwork and insurance enrollment. She'll also show you your workspace." "Thank you, Mr. Rossi." "Enzo," he corrected gently. "We'll be working together. First names are fine." The informality felt dangerous somehow, like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But I nodded anyway. "Enzo." The way he said my name in return, rolling the syllables with that slight Italian accent, made warmth spread through my chest. I pushed the feeling down, buried it under layers of practical concern and self-preservation. I couldn't afford to misread kindness for anything more. Wouldn't survive another mistake like Marcus. My first day in the office started at 8:30 on a Monday morning. Adriana, a warm woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an efficiency that bordered on terrifying, spent the morning walking me through insurance forms, tax documents, and the basics of the office phone system. "You'll mostly be supporting Enzo and Vincent," she explained, showing me to a desk positioned just outside Enzo's office. Answering calls, managing calendars, coordinating meetings. Nothing too complicated, but it can get busy. The desk was nicer than any furniture I owned. Real wood, with a comfortable chair that had lumbar support and armrests. A new computer sat ready, next to a phone that looked more advanced than my laptop. There was even a small plant in the corner, a peace lily in a ceramic pot. "Enzo had that brought in this morning," Adriana said, noticing my attention. "Said every workspace should have something living in it." The thoughtfulness of the gesture made my throat tight. I ran my fingers over the lily's dark green leaves, blinking back the sudden moisture in my eyes. "Pregnancy hormones," I told myself. That's all this was. "He's a good man," Adriana continued, her voice gentler. "I know the family has a reputation, old money, old grudges, old ways of doing business. But Enzo? He's different, fair, loyal. He takes care of his people." His people. The phrase echoed in my brain, our mind as Adriana continued the orientation. Was that what I was now? One of Enzo's people? The morning passed quickly, a blur of names and procedures, and learning how to navigate the office's various systems. By lunchtime, my head was spinning with information, but in a good way, a productive way that made me feel competent rather than just tired. Enzo emerged from his office around noon, loosening his tie slightly. He paused when he saw me at my new desk, and something in his expression softened. "How's the first day going?" "Good," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "Overwhelming, but good." "Adriana's thorough. You'll have everything memorized by the end of the week." He glanced at his watch. "Have you eaten?" I shook my head. "I brought something from home. Come, have lunch with me. There's a place around the corner that makes excellent sandwiches." When I hesitated, he added, "Consider it part of your training. We can discuss the specifics of what I'll need from you." It was a reasonable request, professional, nothing that should have made my pulse quicken the way it did. "Okay," I agreed. The place around the corner turned out to be a small deli, with maybe 6 tables, run by an older Italian couple who greeted Enzo like family. They fussed over him in rapid Italian, then turned their attention to me with the kind of warm curiosity that made me feel simultaneously welcomed and scrutinized. "La tua ragazza?" the woman asked, her eyes twinkling as she looked between us. "No, Mama Rosa. This is Keisha. She works for me." Enzo's Italian was flawless, his accent native in a way that made me wonder about his background. "Keisha, this is Rosa and Antonio Marchetti. They've been feeding me since I was a kid." Rosa's expression shifted immediately to something maternal and concerned. "You're too skinny," she declared, switching to heavily accented English. "And the baby you need to eat. Sit, sit." Before I could protest, I was being ushered to a table while Rosa disappeared into the kitchen, muttering in Italian about Americans and proper nutrition. Enzo sat across from me, amusement dancing in his dark eyes. "Fair warning, she's going to bring you enough food for 3 people. Just accept it. Fighting Rosa is a battle no one wins. They seem to know you well. They knew my father, knew me when I was running wild in this neighborhood as a kid." His expression grew more serious. "This area, River North, the near north side, this is where my family built their foundation. These people, these businesses, they're part of our history. Our history." The possessiveness in those words, the weight of legacy and obligation, gave me a glimpse into a world I didn't understand. A world where family meant something different than my small, fractured experience, where belonging came with expectations and responsibilities I couldn't begin to fathom. Rosa returned with a tray laden with food sandwiches piled high with meat and cheese, pasta, salad, fruit, and what looked like homemade cookies. She set everything down with the kind of maternal authority that brooked no argument, patting my shoulder affectionately before returning to the kitchen. "I told you," Enzo said, his mouth quirking in a half-smile. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The food was incredible, the kind of simple, honest cooking that reminded me of Sunday dinners at my grandmother's house before she passed. Before everything fell apart. "Tell me about yourself," Enzo said eventually, setting down his sandwich. "I know the basics from your employment file, but I'd like to hear it from you." I stiffened instinctively. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you're willing to share." His eyes were steady on mine, patient. "You moved to Chicago 8 months ago. From Detroit." I took a sip of water, buying time to decide how much to reveal. I needed a fresh start. "The baby's father? Not in the picture. Hasn't been since I told him I was pregnant." The lie came easily. I'd practiced it enough times that it felt almost true, better than the reality that Marcus had been very much in the picture, until I'd fled in the middle of the night with nothing but what I could carry, terrified that if I stayed any longer, I'd end up like the women in the news stories, the ones who didn't leave in time. Enzo nodded slowly, and I had the unsettling sense that he knew I was lying, or at least that he knew there was more to the story than I was telling. "Family?" he asked. "My grandmother raised me. She passed 2 years ago." I picked at my sandwich, suddenly not hungry. "No siblings. My mom died when I was 10, never knew my dad." "I'm sorry." The words were simple, but the sincerity in them was unmistakable. "That must have been hard." It was what it was. I lifted one shoulder in a shrug I'd perfected over the years. "You learn to be resilient, or you don't survive. You're a survivor." It wasn't a question. "I'm trying to be." He was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes studying me with an intensity that made me want to squirm. "You don't have to do it alone anymore, you know. Survive." The statement hung in the air between us, weighted with implications I wasn't ready to examine. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. "I should probably get back," I said, reaching for my purse. Adriana had a few more things to show me this afternoon. Enzo didn't push. He simply nodded, called for Rosa to pack up the leftovers despite my protests, and walked me back to the office. But as we crossed the street, His hand came to rest lightly on my lower back, guiding me around a puddle I hadn't noticed. The touch was brief, professional even, but it sent a jolt of awareness through me that I felt all the way to my bones. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. I'd arrive at the office at 8:30, spend the morning managing Enzo's calendar and fielding calls. Break for lunch, sometimes with Adriana, sometimes alone, once or twice with Enzo, when he needed to discuss scheduling details, and then handle correspondence and filing in the afternoon. It was steady work, predictable, safe. Enzo was a good boss, demanding but fair, with expectations that were high but reasonable. He didn't micromanage, didn't hover, but I was always aware of his presence. The way he'd emerge from his office to ask my opinion on scheduling conflicts. The way his eyes would track my movements when he thought I wasn't looking. The way he'd appear with a bottle of water or a snack mid-afternoon, claiming he'd ordered too much from the deli, but I suspected he was making sure I was eating enough. It was care disguised as casualness, concern packaged as convenience. And despite every warning bell in my head, despite every lesson Marcus had taught me about men who paid too much attention, I found myself responding to it, looking forward to Enzo's quiet check-ins, feeling a flutter in my chest when he smiled at something I said. It was dangerous. I knew it was dangerous. But God, it felt good to be seen, to be noticed in a way that felt appreciative rather than possessive. "You're good at this," Vincent remarked one afternoon, appearing at my desk with a stack of invoices. Vincent Moretti was Enzo's business partner and oldest friend, mid-30s, with sandy hair and an easygoing manner that contrasted sharply with Enzo's intensity, managing his schedule, keeping him organized. The last assistant lasted 3 months before she quit. Said Enzo was too demanding. I smiled, filing the invoices in the appropriate folder. "He's not that bad. That's because he likes you." Vincent leaned against my desk, his expression turning more serious. "I've known Enzo since we were kids. I've never seen him go out of his way for someone the way he has for you." My hands stilled on the filing cabinet. "He's just being a good employer." "Is he?" Vincent's eyes were knowing, gentle but direct. "The job creation, the accommodations, the daily check-ins, that's not standard operating procedure, Keisha. That's personal interest." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I can't, that's not what this is." "Isn't it?" He straightened, his expression sympathetic. "Look, I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. I just think you should know what you're dealing with. Enzo doesn't do things halfway. When he cares about something or someone, he's all in. Protective to the point of possessive. Loyal until you give him a reason not to be." "Vincent." Enzo's voice came from his office doorway, low and controlled but with an edge that made Vincent wince. "A word." Vincent shot me an apologetic look before following Enzo into his office. The door closed, and though I couldn't hear their conversation through the thick wood, I could see them through the glass. Partition, Enzo's gestures sharp with barely controlled anger, Vincent's hands raised in placation. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind spun with Vincent's words. Personal interest. All in. Protective to the point of possessive. I'd experienced possessive before. I had the scars, emotional and physical, to prove it. But Enzo didn't feel like Marcus. Enzo asked instead of demanded, offered instead of commanded, respected my boundaries instead of testing them, at least so far. When Enzo emerged from his office 20 minutes later, Vincent was gone and Enzo's expression was carefully neutral. He stopped at my desk, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. "I apologize for whatever Vincent said to make you uncomfortable." "He didn't," I started, but Enzo cut me off with a raised hand. He overstepped. "It won't happen again." His eyes met mine, dark and intense. But he wasn't wrong. About my interest being personal. My breath caught. "Enzo, I'm not going to lie to you, Keisha. I'm not going to pretend this is just employer-employee, when it hasn't been that from the moment I saw my brother disrespect you." He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something woody and expensive that made my head spin. "But I'm also not going to push. Not going to pressure you. You set the pace. You tell me what you're comfortable with. And if the answer is nothing beyond professional courtesy, I'll respect that. Why? The question came out barely above a whisper. Why me? He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching my face. Because when I look at you, I see strength. I see someone who's been through hell and came out fighting. I see, he stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. I see someone worth protecting, worth knowing, worth everything I could possibly give. The declaration should have terrified me. It was too much, too soon, too intense. But instead of fear, I felt something else unfurl in my chest. Something warm and terrifying and utterly overwhelming. I struggled to find the words. I'm not good at this. At trusting. At letting people in. I know. His voice was gentle. I can wait. I'm pregnant with another man's baby. I can see that. The corner of his mouth lifted. Doesn't change anything for me. You barely know me. Then let me get to know you. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and took my hand in his. His palm was warm, calloused in places I wouldn't have expected. No expectations, no pressure. Just let me in. A little at a time. I should have said no, should have pulled my hand back and reinforced the professional boundaries that were already dangerously blurred. Should have remembered every hard lesson Marcus had taught me about men who seemed too good to be true. But when I looked into Enzo's eyes, I didn't see Marcus's calculated charm or manipulative affection. I saw something raw and genuine, something that felt like honesty. Okay, I breathed, a little at a time. His smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face into something almost beautiful. Thank you. That night, as I rode the L home, I pulled out my phone and stared at Enzo's contact information. He'd insisted on programming his personal number into my phone that first day, claiming it was for emergencies. I'd never called it, but now I found myself wanting to hear his voice, to continue the conversation we'd started, wanting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be real. My finger hovered over his name, and then I heard it. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, following the same rhythm as my own. My blood went cold. I'd been hypervigilant since leaving Detroit, always aware of my surroundings, always watching for Marcus's shadow. He'd found me once before, 3 weeks after I'd left, cornered me outside my first apartment, his hands around my throat before a neighbor's dog had scared him off. I'd moved the next day, changed my number, started paying for everything in cash so he couldn't track my credit cards. But 8 months of nothing had made me complacent, made me think maybe I was finally safe. The footsteps quickened as I turned onto my block. My hand tightened around my phone, pepper spray already in my other hand. The street was poorly lit, most of the streetlights broken or burned out. My building was still half a block away. Too far. Keisha. The voice made my blood freeze. Not Marcus. Worse, somehow, because I didn't recognize it at all. I spun around, pepper spray raised, and found myself facing a man I'd never seen before. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had been broken and healed wrong multiple times. Mr. Rossi wants to speak with you, the man said, his voice flat. My mind raced. Enzo wouldn't send someone to grab me off the street. Would he? Which Mr. Rossi? I managed, proud that my voice didn't shake. The man's smile was cold. The one who doesn't appreciate his brother's charity cases. Luca, before I could scream, before I could run, the man's hand clamped over my mouth and I was being dragged backward into an alley, my phone and pepper spray clattering to the pavement. Terror flooded through me, sharp and absolute. Not again. Not when I'd finally found something resembling safety. Not when there was a baby to protect. I fought, kicked, clawed, tried to bite the hand over my mouth. But he was so much bigger, so much stronger, just like Marcus had been. Make this easy on yourself, the man growled in my ear. Mr. Rossi just wants to talk, but if you keep fighting, I'm authorized to ensure your cooperation by any means necessary. His free hand moved to my stomach, the threat implicit. I went still, absolute, every maternal instinct I had screaming louder than my survival instinct. Good girl, the man said, and started pulling me toward a dark sedan idling at the alley's entrance. This was it. This was how I died, or worse, how I lost everything I'd been fighting for. The baby kicked inside. Me, a strong flutter that felt like protest, like fight. I'm sorry, I thought, tears streaming down my face. I'm so sorry. And then I heard it, a voice cutting through the night like a blade. Let her go, now. The hand over my mouth loosened slightly. The man holding me turned, and I saw Enzo standing at the alley entrance, backlit by the streetlight. He wasn't alone, 3 men flanked him, all dressed in dark suits, all radiating the kind of controlled violence that made my captor's posturing look amateurish. This doesn't concern you, Enzo, my captor said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. My brother is about to learn a very painful lesson about what happens when someone touches what's mine. Enzo's voice was soft, deadly calm. You have 3 seconds to take your hands off her before I demonstrate on you. Mr. Luca said, 1. The hand on my stomach tightened. 2. I saw Enzo's expression change, saw the exact moment when calculated threat became something darker, something primal. He didn't make it to 3. I didn't see Enzo move. 1 second he was 10 feet away. The next he was on my captor with the kind of vicious efficiency that spoke of violence as instinct rather than learned skill. The hand on my mouth disappeared as the man was ripped away from me, thrown against the alley wall with enough force that I heard the crack of bone on brick. Don't look, one of Enzo's men said, suddenly beside me. His voice was gentle despite the gun now visible in his shoulder holster. Come on, let's get you out of here. But I couldn't look away, couldn't stop watching as Enzo systematically destroyed the man who'd threatened my baby. Each punch was precise, controlled, aimed to hurt rather than kill. But the fury behind them was absolute. Enzo, the man beside me, Marco. I realized. The bodyguard I'd seen at the restaurant called out. She's safe. That's enough. Enzo froze, his fist raised for another blow. The man beneath him was barely conscious, blood streaming from his nose and mouth. Slowly, so slowly, Enzo lowered his hand and stepped back. Then he turned to me. His knuckles were bloody. His shirt was torn. There was a wild look in his eyes that should have terrified me. Instead, I ran to him. I don't know what possessed me. Don't know what made me throw myself into the arms of a man who'd just beaten someone unconscious in front of me. But the moment his arms closed around me, the moment I felt his heart hammering against mine, something inside me cracked open. You're safe, he murmured into my hair, his voice shaking. I've got you. You're safe. How did you... I couldn't form a complete sentence, couldn't stop shaking. I had Marco follow you home, every night since you started. His arms tightened around me. I knew Luca would try something. I just didn't know when. He'd had me followed. Had me watched, without my knowledge or consent. It should have felt like a violation. Like Marcus all over. Again, controlling, possessive, invasive. But all I felt was overwhelming relief that someone had been watching. That someone had cared enough to make sure I was safe. I'm taking you home, Enzo said, pulling back just enough to cup my face in his hands. My home, where I can protect you properly. I can't, my apartment is being cleaned out as we speak. At my shocked expression, he added, You're not going back there, Keisha. Not tonight. Not ever. It's not safe. You can't just, I can, and I am. His thumbs brushed away, the tears still streaming down my face. You can fight me on this tomorrow. Tonight, just let me keep you safe. Please. The please broke something in me. This powerful, dangerous man, who'd just put someone in the hospital for daring to touch me, was asking. Not demanding. Not commanding. Asking. Okay, I whispered. He kissed my forehead, gentle, despite the violence still crackling in the air around us. Thank you. Marco appeared with my phone and pepper spray, both retrieved from the pavement. The car's around front. We should move before the police arrive. Police. Right. Because there was now an unconscious man bleeding in an alley, and witnesses, and questions that would need answering. What about him? I asked, glancing at my attacker. He'll be dealt with, Enzo said, his voice cold. But not by the police. This stays in the family. In the family. The phrase sent a chill down my spine, reminding me that whatever Enzo was, whatever world he inhabited, it existed outside the normal rules I understood. I should have been afraid, should have run. Instead, I let him lead me to a black SUV with tinted windows, let him help me into the back seat, let him pull me close, while Marco drove us away from my old life and toward something new. Something dangerous. Something that felt terrifyingly like home. Enzo's house wasn't a house. It was an estate. Wrought iron gates opened onto a circular driveway. A 3-story stone mansion rose against the night sky, windows glowing with warm light. Manicured gardens stretched in every direction, even in the October darkness, looking immaculate. This is where you live? I asked, my voice small. One of my properties. He helped me out of the SUV, his hand firm and warm around mine. The security is better here than at my downtown condo. Security. Right. Because I needed security now. Because Luca Rossi had just sent someone to grab me off the street. The reality of my situation crashed over me like a wave. I swayed, suddenly dizzy, the adrenaline that had been keeping me upright finally deserting me. Keisha! Enzo caught me before I could fall, sweeping me up into his arms like I weighed nothing. Marco, get Dr. Castellano on the phone, now. I'm fine, I protested weakly. Just dizzy. You're not fine. You were just assaulted while pregnant. We're getting you checked out. He carried me through massive double doors into a foyer that belonged in a museum. Marble floors, crystal chandelier, a grand staircase that curved up to the second floor. He didn't pause, just kept walking toward what looked like a living room, setting me carefully on a leather sofa that probably cost more than my car. Stay, he ordered, then disappeared down a hallway. I sat, trying to process everything that had happened in the last hour. The attack, Enzo's violence, the revelation that he'd had me followed for weeks, the fact that I was now in his house, surrounded by luxury I couldn't begin to comprehend, with no clear path back to my former life. A woman appeared older, maybe 60s, with kind eyes and an air of competent authority. She carried a tray with tea and what looked like crackers. Mr. Rossi said you might be in shock, she said, her accent faintly Italian. I'm Lucia. I manage the house. This will help settle your stomach. I took the tea with shaking hands. Thank you. She sat beside me, close but not crowding. The doctor is on his way. He's very good. He'll make sure you and the baby are fine. The baby. God, the baby. My hands went to my stomach, feeling for movement. There, a strong kick. Relief flooded through me. The baby's moving, I told Lucia, my voice breaking. That's good, right? Very good. She patted my hand gently. But the doctor will make sure. Mr. Rossi doesn't take chances with people he cares about. People he cares about. Was that what I was? Enzo returned, his bloody knuckles now cleaned and bandaged. He'd changed his torn shirt for a fresh one, though his hair was still disheveled from the fight. He looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. Doctor, Castellano will be here in 15 minutes. He sat on the coffee table in front of me, taking my hands in his. How are you feeling? Confused, scared, overwhelmed. I met his eyes. You had me followed. I did. For how long? Since the night I offered you a ride and you refused. His jaw tightened. I knew Luca wouldn't let it go. Knew he'd try something. I needed to make sure you were protected. Without asking me. Without telling me. Would you have agreed if I'd asked? I opened my mouth to say yes, then closed it. He was right. I would have refused, would have seen it as controlling, invasive, would have run. You still should have told me, I said finally. You're right. I should have. His thumbs traced circles on the backs of my hands. I'm not good at asking permission, Keisha. I'm used to making decisions and expecting people to follow. But with you, he stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. With you, I want to be better. I want to earn your trust, not demand it. The vulnerability in his voice, in his eyes, cracked something open in my chest. Your brother, I said. He sent that man. Yes. The single word was loaded with fury barely contained. And he'll answer for it. What are you going to do? Enzo's expression went cold, dangerous. What needs to be done? Luca crossed a line tonight. Put you and your baby at risk. That's unforgivable. Please, don't. I stopped, not sure what I was asking. Don't hurt him? Don't kill him? Don't do whatever terrifying thing you're planning? I won't kill him, Enzo said, reading my thoughts. He's family, blood. But he needs to understand that you're under my protection now. That touching you means consequences he can't afford. Under his protection. The phrase should have chafed, should have triggered every independence instinct I had. Instead, it felt like safety, like the first full breath I'd taken in months. I don't understand any of this, I admitted. This world you live in, these rules you follow. I know. He brought my hands to his lips, kissing my knuckles gently. And I know asking you to trust me is asking a lot, but I promise you this. Keisha, as long as you're with me, nothing will hurt you. No one will threaten you or your baby. You're mine to protect now. Mine to protect. Not mine to control. Not mine to own. Mine to protect. The distinction mattered. Made all the difference. The doorbell rang, and moments later, Dr. Castellano was ushering me into a guest bedroom that had been converted into a makeshift examination room. He was thorough, kind, asking questions about my pregnancy history while checking my vitals and the baby's heartbeat. Everything looks good, he said finally, packing up his equipment. The baby's heartbeat is strong, no signs of distress. You're shaken up, understandably, but physically you're both fine. The relief was so intense I started crying. Couldn't stop crying, actually. Great heaving sobs that felt like they came from somewhere deep in my soul. Enzo was there immediately, pulling me into his arms, holding me while I fell apart. He didn't try to shush me or tell me everything was fine. He just held me, one hand stroking my hair, the other pressed protectively over my stomach. I've got you, he murmured. I've got you both. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I believed it. I woke to sunlight, streaming through unfamiliar windows and the scent of coffee and something sweet, pancakes, maybe, or French toast. For a moment, I was disoriented, trying to place where I was. Then memory flooded back. The attack, Enzo's violence, his house, his protection. I sat up slowly, taking in the room I'd been too exhausted to examine last night. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of my entire apartment, with a 4-poster bed, plush carpet, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a designer magazine. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking manicured gardens. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in," I called, pulling the silk robe someone had left on the chair around me. My clothes from yesterday were gone, replaced by soft pajamas in exactly my size. Lucia entered, carrying a tray. "Good morning, dear. Mr. Rossi thought you might prefer to eat up here. He's in meetings all morning, but he asked me to let you know he'll check on you at lunch." She set the tray on the potted bedside table, coffee, juice, a plate loaded with eggs, bacon, and fresh fruit. More food than I could possibly eat. "Thank you," I said. "Lucia, my clothes, being laundered. Mr. Rossi had some things brought over from your apartment last night. They're in the closet." She gestured to a door I hadn't noticed. staying at the Galaxy Motel on Halstead, working construction under the table. And he's been watching the restaurant. My blood ran cold. Watching? We pulled security footage. He's been outside Carmelo's at least a dozen times in the past 2 weeks, watching the staff entrance. He knows your schedule, or knew it before you stopped working there. Enzo's expression was carved from stone. He doesn't know about the house? Not yet, but it's only a matter of time. Then we handle this now. Enzo stood, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. Tony, Marco with me. Keisha. He turned to me. You stay here. Lucia will stay with you. Don't answer the door for anyone except me. What are you going to do? But I already knew. Could see it in the cold fury in his eyes. What I should have done the moment you told me about him. He kissed my forehead, gentle despite the violence radiating from him. I'm going to make sure he never threatens you again. Enzo, please don't do anything you'll regret. He looked at me, and his smile was terrible. I won't regret this. I promise you that. The waiting was agony. I paced Enzo's living room while Lucia tried to distract me with tea and conversation. But all I could think about was Enzo confronting Marcus. 2 dangerous men, both possessive in their own ways, both convinced I belonged to them. What if Marcus hurt him? What if Enzo went too far and ended up arrested? What if... The front door opened. I jumped to my feet, my heart hammering. Enzo walked in, followed by Marco and Tony. His knuckles were bruised. His suit jacket was gone. But he was alive, whole, walking toward me with purpose. It's done, he said simply. What did you do? I explained the situation to Marcus, made it very clear that you're under my protection, that any attempt to contact you, come near you, or claim rights to your baby would have permanent consequences. His eyes were hard, unapologetic. He understood. You hurt him. Yes. No hesitation, no remorse. I made sure he understood on a physical level what would happen if he ever came near you again. Is he alive, in a hospital, with several broken ribs and a very clear understanding of his new reality? Enzo cupped my face in his hands. He's not your problem anymore, Keisha. He'll never be your problem again. I should have been horrified. Should have been appalled by the violence, the brutality. Instead, I felt relief so intense it made me dizzy. Thank you, I whispered. You don't thank me for this. His thumbs brushed my cheeks. Protecting you isn't something you owe me gratitude for. It's just what I do, what I'll always do. I kissed him then, deep and desperate and full of all the emotions I couldn't name. He responded immediately, one hand tangling in my hair, the other spreading across my lower back, pulling me as close as my belly would allow. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were dark with desire and something deeper. I love you, I said, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess them. I know it's fast and crazy and probably a terrible idea, but I love you. His smile was incandescent. Say it again. I love you, Enzo Rossi. Marry me. I blinked. Sure I'd misheard. What? Marry me. He was already pulling a small box from his pocket velvet, clearly prepared in advance. I was going to wait. Do this properly. But I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of pretending this is anything less than forever. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, a simple solitaire diamond on a platinum band. Beautiful, without being ostentatious. I know you're scared, Enzo continued, dropping to one knee despite my belly between us. I know you have every reason not to trust this, but I'm asking anyway. Marry me, Keisha. Let me be your family. Let me be this baby's father. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that love doesn't have to hurt. Tears streamed down my face. This is insane. Probably. We've known each other less than 2 months. I know. Your family will lose their minds. They'll adjust. His eyes never left mine. Say yes, Keisha. Take a chance on us. I looked at this man kneeling before me. This complicated, dangerous, impossibly gentle man who'd upended my entire life, who'd protected me without being asked, who'd fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself, who looked at me like I was precious rather than broken. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." He surged to his feet, pulling me into his arms, spinning me in a circle before seeming to remember the baby and setting me down carefully. Then he was sliding the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. "I love you," he said, kissing me between each word. "I love you. I love you. I love you too." I laughed through my tears, giddy with joy and terror and hope. "God help me, but I love you too." 2 months later, the contractions started just after midnight. I woke Enzo with a grip on his arm that probably left bruises. "It's time," I gasped. He was up instantly, already reaching for his phone to call Dr. Castellano. "How far apart?" 5 minutes, maybe less. The next hours were a blur of activity. The drive to the private hospital Enzo had arranged, Dr. Castellano's calm presence, Lucia appearing with my hospital bag already packed, Enzo holding my hand through each contraction, his usual composure cracking as he watched me in pain. "You're doing so good," he murmured, wiping sweat from my forehead. "So strong, so brave." "I hate you," I panted. "This is your fault, not technically." But his smile was strained, his eyes worried. "If you ever come near me again, I'll kill me. I know. You've mentioned it several times." He kissed my temple. "I'll take my chances." 12 hours later, our daughter was born. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Perfect. Enzo cut the cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. When the nurse placed her in my arms, cleaned and wrapped, he sat beside me on the bed. One arm around my shoulders, the other hand gently touching her tiny fingers. "She's perfect," he whispered. "You're perfect." "We haven't picked a name yet," I said, unable to look away from her face. She had my nose, my complexion, but Enzo's dark hair already showing. "Rosa," Enzo said quietly, "after my mother. If that's okay with you?" I looked at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes, the hope. "Rosa Rossi, that's a lot of R's." "Rosa Keisha Rossi," he amended. "Best of both of us." "Perfect." I leaned into his shoulder, exhausted and elated and overwhelmed. She's perfect. 6 months later, I woke to sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows and the sound of Enzo singing in Italian. Badly. I smiled, pulling on a robe and padding barefoot down the hall to the nursery. He stood by the changing table, Rosa in his arms, completely oblivious to my presence. He was dressed for work, suit pants, dress shirt, though his tie hung unknotted around his neck. Rosa was in a onesie that said, "Daddy's Princess," in glittery letters, a gift from his Aunt Gina, who'd become Rosa's most devoted admirer. "And then your mama said yes," Enzo was saying, bouncing Rosa gently. "Even though Papa was covered in another man's blood, even though it was the craziest proposal in history, she said yes, Principessa, because your mama is braver than anyone I know." My heart melted. Completely, utterly melted. "You're going to give her unrealistic expectations about romance," I said from the doorway. Enzo turned, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Good. Then she'll know not to settle for anything less than someone who loves her completely." I crossed to them, kissing Rosa's forehead and then Enzo's mouth. "You're going to be late for your meeting. Let them wait." He pulled me close. Rosa nestled between us. "I have everything I need right here. 6 months of marriage, 6 months of learning to trust, 6 months of therapy, both individual and couples working through my trauma and his controlling instincts, 6 months of building something real. It wasn't always easy. Enzo still made decisions without consulting me sometimes. I still had moments of panic when he was late coming home. We fought about his family's disapproval, about my reluctance to fully embrace his world, about money and control and all the complicated dynamics of blending 2 very different lives. But we also laughed. We also loved. We also chose each other, every single day. I never thought I'd have this, I said quietly, watching our daughter grab Enzo's finger with her tiny hand. A family, safety, love, that doesn't hurt. You deserve all of it, Enzo said. You deserve everything. So do you. He smiled, that brilliant smile that transformed his entire face. Then we're lucky we found each other. Rosa made a small sound, not quite a cry, not quite a coo. We both looked down at her, and she was staring up at us with those dark, serious eyes that were pure Rossi. She's judging us, I said. Probably. She's very discerning. Enzo kissed her forehead. Takes after her mother. Smooth talker. It's why you married me. I married you because you beat up my ex-boyfriend. That too. He grinned, unrepentant. Want me to do it again? I could make a habit of it. Every anniversary, maybe? You're ridiculous. You love me anyway. I did. God help me, but I did. The intercom buzzed Marco, letting us know the car was ready. Enzo sighed, reluctantly handing Rosa to me. I'll be back by 6, he said, kissing us both. Family dinner. Just us, I agreed. He paused at the door, looking back at us, his wife and daughter, standing in the nursery of the home we'd built together. This, he said quietly, this is everything. I know, I said. Now go to work before Vincent calls and yells at both of us. He left laughing, and I carried Rosa to the window, watching as his car pulled away, watching as Marco and Tony's security vehicle followed at a discreet distance. This was my life now. Luxury and danger, love and protection. The constant awareness that the man I'd married existed in a world most people would never understand. But it was also laughter over breakfast. Quiet evenings reading while Enzo worked. Rosa's first smile, her first laugh. All the tiny miracles that made up a life. I'd come to Chicago running from one dangerous man. I'd ended up in the arms of another one, who'd taught me that danger and safety weren't mutually exclusive. That love could be fierce without being frightening. That family could be chosen, as well as born. Rosa cooed, her tiny hand grabbing at my hair. I smiled down at her. This perfect little human we'd created together. Your daddy's a little crazy, I told her, but he loves us, and that makes all the difference. The morning sun streamed through the windows, bathing us both in golden light. Outside, Chicago stretched in every direction, the city where I'd fled seeking safety, and found so much more. Found home. Epilogue. 1 year later. The christening was held at the same church where Enzo's parents had married. The entire Rossi family attended, even Luca, who'd been allowed back into family functions on the condition that he never spoke to me or about me. Salvatore held Rosa during the ceremony, his stern expression softening as she grabbed his finger. After months of resistance, he'd finally accepted our marriage, maybe even approved, though he'd never say so directly. Your daughter is beautiful, he'd told Enzo the night before. And your wife, she's stronger than I gave her credit for. It was as close to a blessing as we'd get. Now, as we stood at the altar, Enzo's hand at my lower back and Rosa in my arms, I looked around at the assembled family. Some still viewed me with suspicion. Others had welcomed me warmly. All had learned to accept that I wasn't going anywhere. I've been thinking, Enzo murmured as the priest droned on. We should have another one. I looked at him, startled. Another baby? Maybe 2 more. Rosa needs siblings. You're insane. You married me anyway. His eyes were dancing with amusement and love. So what do you say, Mrs. Rossi? Want to make me the luckiest man alive? Again? I looked down at Rosa, sleeping peacefully despite the ceremony around her. Looked at Enzo, this impossible man who'd turned my world upside down and given me everything I'd never dared to dream of. Ask me again in a year, I said. I'll ask you again tonight. He kissed my temple, and tomorrow, and the day after that, persistent. It's why you love me. He was right. It was. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.